A simple woman mocked by snobby elite, only for them to discover she's 100 times richer than them. They saw her plain beige dress amidst their designer gowns, heard their whispers of "so poor," but never imagined the fortune behind her modest appearance, or the lesson they were about to learn. The crystal chandeliers of the Hawthorne Ballroom cast a golden glow over Boston's most exclusive charity gala. Women in designer gowns adorned with diamonds glided across marble floors, while men in tailored tuxedos exchanged business cards disguised as small talk. Catherine Winters adjusted her sapphire necklace, its blue stones matching her elegant dress perfectly. Beside her, Eleanor Madison smoothed her black designer gown, while Patricia Reynolds beamed in her navy blue ensemble with silver accents, Boston's social elite in the flesh. "The new hospital wing better be named after someone worthwhile this time," Catherine remarked, eyeing the room critically. Last year's donors were hardly established. As the women nodded in agreement, a newcomer entered the ballroom. Emma Sullivan stood in a simple beige dress, modest, unadorned, and painfully plain compared to the couture surrounding her. No statement jewelry, no designer clutch. Her auburn hair was styled simply, her makeup minimal. "Who invited her?" Patricia whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. "And in that dress? It looks like she's here for a job interview, not a $5,000 a plate charity event." Emma moved through the crowd with quiet confidence. At 34, she carried herself with natural grace that required no embellishment. She paused to study the architectural renderings of the Children's Hospital expansion, tonight's designated cause, her eyes focused on details others overlooked. What none of these socialites knew was that Emma had spent the morning touring the hospital's current pediatric ward, learning the names of young patients and promising a little girl with leukemia that the new wing would have windows facing the garden where butterflies gathered in spring, a promise Emma knew would be kept. "I don't believe we've met," came a cultured voice beside Emma. Catherine Winters extended her hand, diamond bracelet catching the light. Catherine Winters, hospital board fundraising chair. Emma turned, offering a genuine smile. "Emma Sullivan, it's lovely to meet you." Catherine's smile remained fixed as her eyes assessed Emma's attire, searching for a designer label, finding none. "And what brings you to our little gathering tonight? Are you with the medical staff?" "No," Emma replied simply. "I'm just passionate about children's health care." Eleanor and Patricia drifted closer, circling like elegantly dressed sharks. "We don't often see new faces at these events," Eleanor commented, champagne flute poised delicately in manicured fingers. "The Hawthorne Gala is usually quite exclusive." Emma nodded. "The invitation mentioned the pediatric oncology wing. It's a cause close to my heart." Patricia exchanged a quick glance with Catherine, eyebrows raised. "Well, every small contribution helps, I suppose, though tonight's donors are mostly in the 6- and 7-figure range." "It adds up," Emma agreed pleasantly. Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly. There was something about this plain woman's confidence that unsettled her. "Your dress," she began, voice dripping with false concern. "Is it vintage?" The question hung in the air, its true meaning transparent. Eleanor barely concealed a smirk behind her champagne glass. "Just simple," Emma replied, unperturbed. "I find elaborate designs distracting." "How practical," Catherine replied, her tone making the word sound like an insult. "We must introduce you to Montgomery Wells. He's our biggest donor from last year. $5 million for the emergency department. Monty loves meeting everyday people." Emma's eyes reflected a quiet wisdom. "I'd enjoy that." As they guided Emma across the ballroom, Catherine subtly signaled to others in their circle, rolling her eyes when Emma wasn't looking. Whispers followed in their wake. "Who brought the secretary? Is that dress from a department store? So poor thing, she clearly doesn't belong here." Dr. James Harris, the hospital's chief of pediatrics, approached their group with a warm smile. "Ladies, wonderful to see you again." His eyes brightened upon seeing Emma. "Ms. Sullivan, I didn't know you'd be here tonight." Catherine's perfect eyebrows arched in surprise. "You two know each other?" Before Emma could respond, Dr. Harris continued enthusiastically. "Ms. Sullivan visited our pediatric ward this morning, spent hours with the children. Little Sophie hasn't stopped talking about the butterfly garden you promised her." Catherine's smile tightened. How charitable. But, Dr. Harris, Miss Sullivan was just about to join us in meeting Montgomery Wells. Monty's caught up with the mayor at the moment, Dr. Harris replied. Perhaps Miss Sullivan could share her thoughts on the new wing design while we wait. Her perspective might be valuable. Patricia gave a silvery laugh. James, darling, I'm sure Miss Sullivan is more interested in the canapes than construction plans. This is rather technical after all. Emma remained silent, her expression betraying nothing. Actually, Dr. Harris replied, his tone cooling slightly, Miss Sullivan asked some remarkably insightful questions about our pediatric care protocols this morning. I'd value her input. Catherine smoothly intervened. James, we shouldn't overwhelm our guest. These events can be intimidating for newcomers. She turned to Emma with practiced condescension. The donor circle operates quite differently from regular hospital visitors. It's all rather complex. Across the room, the hospital's executive director ascended the small stage. Catherine's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just moments away from revealing our major donors for the new children's wing, she whispered to her friends. This is where we shine, darlings. Emma glanced toward the stage, then at her watch. If you'll excuse me, I need to step out for a moment. Of course, Catherine replied, barely concealing her relief. The restrooms are down the hall to the left, though I'm not sure they can do much to help with that dress. As Emma walked away, Patricia leaned in. My goodness, Catherine, wherever did they find her? She looks like she wandered in from a job fair. The hospital probably invited some everyday heroes for publicity photos, Catherine replied dismissively. You know how it is? They need to show diversity in their donor materials. The working class makes for touching brochure stories. Eleanor nodded smugly. Did you see her expression when you mentioned Montgomery's 5 million? I thought her eyes would pop out of her head. The women laughed, crystal glasses tinkling like wind chimes as they clinked them together in solidarity, completely unaware of the tidal shift about to upend their carefully ordered social hierarchy. If you're enjoying this story of appearances versus reality, hit that subscribe button now. Let's continue and see what happens when Emma's true identity is revealed. Emma slipped back into the ballroom just as Richard Thornton, the hospital's executive director, tapped the microphone. The crowd quieted, jewelry glinting under the chandeliers as Boston's elite turned their attention to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight marks a historic chapter for Boston Children's Hospital. Thornton began, his voice resonating with practiced gravitas. The new pediatric oncology wing will revolutionize how we treat our youngest cancer patients. Catherine and her circle positioned themselves prominently near the front, champagne flutes refreshed, expressions expectant. This was their moment, where donations were announced, names immortalized, and social pecking orders reinforced. Emma stood quietly at the back, observing. Before we unveil our donor wall, Thornton continued, I want to share something extraordinary. For the first time in our hospital's 150-year history, we've received an anonymous donation that has left our entire board speechless. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Anonymous donations weren't uncommon, but the director's tone suggested something unprecedented. Catherine frowned slightly. Anonymous donors didn't fit neatly into her social calculations. They couldn't be ranked, impressed, or leveraged for future connections. This individual contributed $25 million specifically for our pediatric oncology wing, Thornton announced, with the single condition that the new garden terrace be called Sophie's Butterfly Haven after one of our young patients. Dr. Harris's eyes widened, his gaze immediately searching the room until it landed on Emma. While we normally respect our anonymous donors' privacy, Thornton continued, this particular benefactor has given us permission to acknowledge them tonight, as they are present in this very room. Catherine's group straightened imperceptibly, each woman mentally calculating if her family could have secretly made such a donation without her knowledge. Our extraordinary benefactor has a unique understanding of childhood illness, Thornton explained. 20 years ago, she herself was a patient in our hospital, fighting a battle no child should face. Today, she continues that fight on behalf of others. The director looked across the ballroom. Ms. Sullivan, would you please join me on stage? The room fell silent, then erupted in confused whispers. Catherine's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips, her expression caught between disbelief and horror. "There must be another Sullivan here," Patricia whispered frantically. But Emma was already moving forward, her simple beige dress parting the sea of designer gowns like Moses at the Red Sea. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she ascended the steps to the stage with quiet dignity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thornton announced, his voice carrying over the whispers, "it is my honor to introduce Ms. Emma Sullivan, founder of the Sullivan Foundation for Children's Medical Research and our lead benefactor for the new oncology wing." Catherine's champagne glass nearly slipped from her fingers. Eleanor's mouth formed a perfect O of shock. Patricia clutched her pearls as if seeking reassurance from their solidity. "Ms. Sullivan's foundation has funded groundbreaking pediatric cancer research across the country," Thornton continued, "and her personal contribution of $25 million is the largest single donation in our hospital's history." Emma stepped forward to the microphone, her simple dress now seeming less a fashion faux pas and more a deliberate choice, a statement about values and priorities that made Catherine's designer gown suddenly feel ostentatious. "Thank you, Director Thornton," Emma began, her voice soft but unwavering. "When I was 12 years old, I spent 9 months in this hospital fighting leukemia. The doctors and nurses here didn't just save my life, they showed me what compassion truly means." The room hung on her every word, social hierarchies momentarily forgotten as they glimpsed the depth behind her unassuming exterior. "Today, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to give back," Emma continued. "The Sullivan Foundation was created with a singular mission: to ensure that every child, regardless of their family's financial circumstances, receives the same quality of care that saved my life." Dr. Harris was beaming with undisguised pride. Across the room, Catherine and her friends had gone pale, their earlier mockery replaying in their minds with devastating clarity. "Sophie's Butterfly Haven will be a place of healing and hope," Emma explained, her eyes bright with purpose. "Because sometimes the smallest beings, whether butterflies or children, can teach us the most profound lessons about transformation and resilience." As Emma stepped away from the microphone, the ballroom erupted in applause. Director Thornton invited donors to view the architectural plans for the new wing, and the crowd surged forward, many casting curious glances at the unassuming woman now revealed to be Boston's most significant philanthropist. Catherine remained frozen in place, her world tilting on its axis. The woman she had dismissed, mocked, and patronized just minutes ago wasn't just wealthy. She was a legend in philanthropic circles, with resources that dwarfed the Winters family fortune. And Catherine had asked if her dress was vintage. As the crowd migrated toward the architectural displays, Emma found herself at the center of a swirling sea of attention. Board members who had barely glanced at her earlier now competed for her acknowledgement. Donors who had whispered behind their hands now beamed with manufactured familiarity. Through the pressing crowd, Emma caught sight of Catherine and her friends huddled in urgent conversation. Their glances toward her carried a mixture of mortification and calculation, the latter troubling her more than the former. Dr. Harris appeared at Emma's side, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "I wanted to see their faces when they realized," he admitted quietly. "Is that terrible of me?" Emma's lips curved into a gentle smile. "I didn't do this for the reveal, James, though I admit it does make a point. 25 million points to be exact," he replied with a chuckle. Then, more seriously, "Sophie hasn't stopped talking about her butterflies. You've given her something precious, hope with a timeline, something to look forward to." Emma's expression softened at the mention of the young patient. Some promises matter more than others. Their conversation paused as Catherine approached, her designer heels clicking purposefully across the marble floor. Eleanor and Patricia flanked her, their expressions schooled into practiced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Miss Sullivan," Catherine began, her voice honey-sweet. "What an absolutely wonderful surprise. Had we known of your foundation's important work, but you didn't need to know," Emma interrupted gently. "That's rather the point, isn't it?" Catherine faltered, her social armor developing its first visible crack. There appears to have been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Emma replied, her tone kind but direct. "You saw what you expected to see. A woman whose worth you measured by her clothing and connections rather than her character." Eleanor stepped forward, diamond earrings catching the light. We meant no offense. These events have certain expectations, standards. Yes, Emma agreed. And tonight has certainly been illuminating about what those standards truly are. Patricia, growing uncomfortable with the directness of the exchange, attempted to pivot. Your foundation sounds fascinating, Emma. May I call you Emma? Perhaps we could discuss your involvement in our annual fundraiser luncheon next month. The exposure would be beneficial to whom? Emma asked quietly. The question hung in the air, its implications unmistakable. Director Thornton approached, breaking the tense moment. Ms. Sullivan, the mayor would like to personally thank you for your extraordinary contribution. Emma nodded graciously. Of course. As she turned to follow the director, she paused, looking back at the three women. The children's wing opens in 6 months. When it does, I hope you'll visit, not for a ribbon-cutting photo, but to meet the children whose lives will be transformed. Their perspectives might surprise you. Left behind, Catherine's carefully constructed facade crumbled further. Did that just happen? She whispered to her friends. 25 million, Eleanor murmured, the number hanging between them like an indictment. And we treated her like she wandered in from the street. Patricia's gaze followed Emma's retreating figure. Who exactly is she? Beyond the foundation? Catherine pulled out her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she typed. Her eyes widened as results populated her screen. The Sullivan technology fortune, she breathed. Her parents were Robert and Margaret Sullivan, the tech pioneers who revolutionized medical imaging. They died in a plane crash 10 years ago. She inherited everything. How much is everything? Eleanor pressed. Catherine looked across the room. Emma stood with the mayor and hospital board, her simple beige dress now the most powerful statement in the room. Not because of its design or cost, but because of the woman wearing it. A woman who had the means to outshine everyone, yet chose understanding over ostentation, substance over spectacle. The evening's true beneficiaries weren't in this ballroom at all, but in hospital beds across the city. Their futures now brighter, because someone who could have lived solely for herself had chosen instead to live for others. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself momentarily alone, studying the rendering of Sophie's butterfly haven. The garden's design included special accommodations for hospital beds and wheelchairs, allowing even the most critically ill children to experience nature's healing presence. It's beautiful, came a voice, Catherine's, her tone now stripped of its earlier condescension. Emma turned. It will be. Catherine hesitated, then spoke with unexpected sincerity. Why didn't you say something? When I was... Would it have mattered? Emma asked. Should it matter? Catherine fell silent, confronting questions that had never before penetrated her carefully constructed world. My worth, anyone's worth, isn't measured by their bank account or family name, Emma continued gently. The children I visited this morning don't care about designer labels or social connections. They care about kindness, about being seen for who they are, not what they have or how they look. I've never considered it that way, Catherine admitted, the honesty seeming to surprise even herself. Few of us do until something forces us to, Emma replied. She gestured toward the hospital rendering. Every child who comes through these doors deserves to be treated with the same dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances. Just as every person in this room deserves the same, regardless of their dress or pedigree. Catherine's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. I behaved abhorrently. Yes, Emma agreed simply. The question is, what will you do with that realization? Before Catherine could respond, Director Thornton called for attention. The room quieted as he prepared to unveil the donor wall. Names of contributors would be immortalized in order of their donations, with Emma's at the very top. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with profound gratitude that we recognize those whose generosity will make our new children's wing possible. These names represent not just financial contributions, but investments in our community's future. As the velvet covering was pulled away, gasps rippled through the crowd. Where Emma Sullivan's name should have appeared at the top of the donor wall was instead a simple inscription. In honor of Sophie and all children fighting battles beyond their years, your courage inspires our commitment. Director Thornton looked toward Emma, who gave a small nod. Ms. Sullivan has requested that her contribution remain anonymous on our permanent installation, he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "She believes the true focus should remain on the children we serve." The ballroom fell silent as the implication of her choice sank in. Emma had rejected the very recognition that most in this room coveted above all else. Her $25 million donation would forever be attributed not to her name, but to the children themselves. It was perhaps the most powerful statement she could have made, a rejection of the very hierarchy that had led Catherine and her friends to dismiss her in the first place. Catherine turned to Emma, tears glistening in her eyes. For the first time that evening, perhaps for the first time in years, she spoke without calculation or pretense. "You've shown me something tonight I desperately needed to see," she whispered. "Thank you." Emma's smile was genuine. We all need reminding sometimes that our true worth isn't in what we have, but in what we give. As conversations resumed around them, Emma slipped quietly toward the exit. Her purpose for the evening had been accomplished. Not just the donation, but perhaps something equally valuable, a seed of transformation planted in unexpected soil. 6 months later, sunshine spilled through the windows of Sophie's butterfly haven, as Emma guided a wheelchair-bound little girl toward a monarch butterfly resting on a purple coneflower. "See how the wings open and close?" Emma pointed. "They're drying in the sun, gathering strength for flight." Sophie's delicate fingers reached out, not quite touching. "Just like me," she whispered. "I'm gathering strength too." Emma squeezed the 8-year-old's shoulder gently. "Exactly like you." The garden had exceeded even Emma's vision, a sanctuary where healing transcended medicine alone. Flowering plants chosen specifically to attract butterflies created bursts of color against lush greenery. Accessible pathways wound through the space, ensuring every child, regardless of mobility challenges, could experience its wonders. "Ms. Sullivan," called a nurse from the doorway. "The dedication ceremony begins in 10 minutes. Emma nodded. "Ready for your big moment, butterfly girl?" Sophie grinned, the gap where her front teeth had been adding to her charm. "Born ready," she replied, repeating the phrase her doctors used before treatments. As Emma wheeled Sophie toward the new hospital wing's main atrium, she felt a peculiar sense of fulfillment. Not from the building itself, impressive as it was with its state-of-the-art technology and child-centered design, but from the lives it would transform. The atrium buzzed with activity. Hospital staff, patients and their families, media representatives and major donors gathered for the official opening. Emma spotted Dr. Harris speaking with the hospital board near the podium, and there, arranging children from the oncology ward into a small choir, was Catherine Winters. Catherine looked up, catching Emma's eye. Her smile was genuine as she crossed the room. "Sophie, our star singer has arrived," she greeted, kneeling to the child's eye level with natural ease. Gone was the condescension that had once colored her interactions. In its place was authentic warmth. Over the past 6 months, Catherine had undergone a transformation as remarkable as the building they stood in. What began as embarrassment had evolved into genuine self-reflection and, ultimately, action. She'd resigned from 3 social committees to devote her time to the hospital's patient support programs, working directly with families navigating the terrifying landscape of childhood illness. "The children are so excited," Catherine told Emma, rising to her feet. "They've been practicing their song for weeks," Emma nodded. "It sounds beautiful. Mozart would approve." "It was your idea to have them perform," Catherine reminded her. "You said their voices should be the first heard in this space. You were right." Director Thornton approached, clipboard in hand. "We're ready to begin. Ms. Sullivan, would you and Sophie take your places by the ribbon?" The ceremony unfolded with dignified simplicity. Speeches remained mercifully brief, focused on the children who would benefit rather than the adults who had contributed. When Sophie and 3 other young patients cut the ribbon together, their faces radiant with importance. There wasn't a dry eye in the atrium. Afterward, as attendees toured the new facility, Emma found herself alone with Catherine near Sophie's butterfly haven. "I owe you an apology," Catherine said, watching butterflies drift between flowers. "Not just for that night, but for a lifetime of measuring people by the wrong metrics." Emma shook her head. "You've apologized enough. Your actions these past months speak louder than any words could." Catherine smiled ruefully. "Eleanor and Patricia think I've lost my mind, spending my days with sick children instead of planning charity luncheons. Positively scandalous." "And what do you think?" Emma asked. I think I was asleep for most of my life, Catherine replied simply. Making judgments based on appearances, collecting connections instead of creating meaning. She gestured toward the children exploring the garden. They've taught me more about living than 50 years in Boston society ever did. Emma nodded. They have a way of stripping life down to its essentials. My husband doesn't quite understand, Catherine admitted. He's supportive, but confused by the new me. Yesterday he asked when I'd be rejoining the country club committee. And what did you tell him? Catherine laughed. That I'm too busy helping plan the hospital's new sibling support program. The look on his face was priceless. Their conversation paused as Sophie wheeled herself over to a newly emerged butterfly perched on a feeding station. What she doesn't know, Catherine said quietly, is that her mother works 2 jobs to pay for treatments insurance won't cover. I've established a foundation to help families like hers. The paperwork was finalized yesterday. Emma's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. Catherine, that's wonderful. It's a beginning, Catherine replied. You showed me that wealth brings responsibility, not just privilege. I can't donate $25 million, but I can make a difference in my own way. Emma smiled. That's all any of us can do. As they watched Sophie carefully coax a butterfly onto her finger, her face alight with wonder, Catherine spoke again, her voice reflective. That night at the gala, it wasn't really about the money, was it? Your point, I mean. No, Emma acknowledged. It was about seeing beyond surfaces, about recognizing that true worth isn't reflected in clothes or bank accounts or social standing. I judged you by your dress, Catherine said quietly. And now? Emma asked. Catherine's gaze shifted to Sophie, then back to Emma. Now, I try to see people as they are, not as they appear. It's harder than it sounds. The most meaningful changes usually are, Emma replied. A nurse approached, letting them know the children's choir was assembling for their final performance. As they walked back toward the atrium, Catherine paused. Thank you, she said simply, for the humbling I needed and for the opportunity to become someone better. Emma squeezed her hand briefly. We're all works in progress, Catherine. The butterfly doesn't start out with wings. Together, they joined the gathering in the sunlit atrium, where children's voices soon filled the space with song, a chorus of hope rising from those who understood, better than most, the precious nature of each day and the true meaning of transformation. We all make judgments based on appearances, don't we? But, as Catherine learned, looking beyond the surface reveals the true worth of those around us. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and join our community. Share in the comments where you're watching from, or a time when you or someone you know was misjudged based on appearances. Remember, it's not our possessions or position that define our value. It's our character and the difference we make in others' lives. Join us next time for another story that reminds us of life's most meaningful lessons. After all, the most powerful transformations often begin with a simple shift in perspective.